Welcome back to BallBoy Media. I'm LJ, and today we're going to be talking a little bit more about the NBA trade deadline. This is part 2 of 3. Today we're going to be talking about some buyers in the market. If you're new here, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps grow the channel, helps get me in the YouTube algorithm. Thank you for your support. So what makes a buyer? Couple things. Need for improvement. Sometimes there's teams that are kind of on the fringe of being contenders or on the fringe of being playoff contenders, and they need to improve. The trade deadline is a perfect time to do so. Assets or capital. Sometimes a team looks at what they have in terms of assets and they say, okay, we can afford to make a move. Such an example would be the San Antonio Spurs. They have a lot of draft picks coming up. They might say, you know what, we have a player that's on GOAT trajectory. Let's bring in some pieces with this extra capital we have. Desire to trade. In order to be a buyer, you have to be willing to trade. Teams that are going to stay stagnant, that are not going to move during the trade deadline, will not be buyers. Those teams will not be buyers nor sellers. Additionally, you need some buyers or teams that need to win. For example, the Golden State Warriors and Los Angeles Lakers. In my opinion, these teams need to win this year, and while I don't believe either of these teams can be made into championship contenders overnight, another piece might propel them to a greater stage, which is not necessarily a championship. As we know, Steph Curry and LeBron James are getting up there in age, and we know Father Time hasn't quite caught up to them yet, but the clock is ticking, and for these two, stars of yesterday, still stars today in their own right, but they need help at this point in their career, and teams like this could also be buyers where they need to bring in more players. So, on that note, our first buyer is the Golden State Warriors. Now, the Warriors are a non-apron team. They are $330,000 under. What does this mean? So, the NBA's salary cap aprons, and if you haven't watched part 1, I will link that in the description. I go over the aprons, the luxury tax, everything you need to know about the trade deadline, which is in less than a month from today. The first apron has a couple of mitigations that teams that are under it are influenced by, and some of those relate directly to trading. So if I'm the Golden State Warriors and any other team on this list, I want to stay under that first apron. Now, in terms of assets, the Warriors have first-round picks up until 2028 that they can trade. Those are going to be some prime picks for dealing. They also have second-round pick in 2026 and 2028 through 31, as well as Gary Payton II and Kevon Looney on expiring contracts. Additionally, they also have Brandon Podziemski on the second year of a rookie contract, and Andrew Wiggins has still proven to be a valuable player in today's NBA. He's making $27.2 million with 2 years left on his deal after this one. I don't expect them to part from him, but if they were to swing a deal for, say, Jimmy Butler, that might be a player that's included in the deal. Team needs / potential targets for them, in my opinion, a definitive two-guard. Steve Kerr has kind of been running the system where his rotation is a little spotty at times in terms of minutes staying the same for players. He kind of experiments game to game. Additionally, Dennis Schroeder has been playing a lot of two-guard, and I don't know if necessarily that's the best fit. As we've seen so far in Golden State, his numbers are significantly reduced from what they were in Brooklyn when he was the head honcho. They could also use centers. Kerr this week earlier said that Steph Curry really has never played with a stretch 5. And that is true. That's a true statement. He's had guys like Kevon Looney. Looney is great in his own right. He's a stellar rebounder and was part of their championship run in 2022. He played a big role, but he's not a three-point shooter, never has been. Additionally, they need veterans and locker room guys. I feel like every team needs that. And if you're the Warriors, you just want to go all in for talent at this deadline, if you're planning on going all in at some point as Steph Curry battles with time. The potential target I have for them is Nikola Vucevic. He's averaging 20.6 points per game and 10.4 rebounds, shooting very high splits from the field. I would not trade for Jimmy Butler because I feel like he's kind of not a locker room guy, and I think what the Warriors need, they're kind of on a slump right now, and we know that teams that are slumping, sometimes the morale is down. I feel like adding Jimmy Butler would not necessarily make the morale go up. While I don't know if that's true for Vucevic, at least we can count on Vucevic to not bring the vibes down, whereas Butler, I have that concern as we've seen it in Miami and Minnesota and several other places. Vucevic is a stellar three-point shooting center, and I believe next to Steph Curry he will flourish as he has already this season. Second buyer is the Houston Rockets. Now, this is a team that's a lot younger than the Golden State Warriors. They're also a non-apron team. They're $15.2 million under the salary cap, and they have a lot of notable assets. They have several of their own first-round picks, and they also have Phoenix first-round pick in 2027, which who knows where the Suns will be at that time. They also have Cam Whitmore, who is a second-year player. He is just a phenomenal guy on the court. He's averaging 10 points per game and only 15.9 minutes per contest this season, and he has less usage with Tari Eason. Now, he's gotten a little bit of a spike as Eason has been absent the past couple of days, past couple of games, and over the past couple of weeks, but I believe that Houston may not have a spot for him, so I think that if they were to want to swing for a big star, Cam Whitmore would be part of that package, and we know that he's an elite volume scorer. When he gets minutes, he's very capable of being a 3-level threat, and I'm interested, if you're another team, you might think to yourself, okay, this is a guy that we might look to get in a deal. Team needs and potential targets for them. They need three-point shot makers. We know they're a tantalizing defensive presence, but in terms of shooting the three ball, it gets questionable at times, especially when Jalen Green isn't connecting, which happens sometimes, I understand. They might go star hunting. I don't expect it this year because I feel like the Rockets, while they may have a plan, I feel like we as NBA fans may not have seen this exponential rise from them. And I think sometimes they might look at it and say, maybe we didn't expect this rise to be this good this early either. Now, I think in terms of targets, they should target an elite guard and maybe some players from super sellers. What I mean by super sellers is teams that are going to do a fire sale. They're going to push all their chips out and just get assets and really thin the margins of their teams. I think the Nets are a team like this. I think the Trailblazers could potentially be a team like this. Additionally, Jimmy Butler, I think, makes a lot more sense on Houston than he does Golden State. I think, he's a Texas guy. I talked about him in a previous video, and I think that having him as a guy to go to in late game situations could be very beneficial for Houston. But I think, honestly, if I'm them, I might sacrifice a little extra, maybe 130 cents on the dollar, to target Anthony Simons. Simons is having a good season. He's averaging 18 and 5, and he's shooting 42% and 36% from deep. While those numbers may not jump off the page, Simons, when you watch him, he meets the eye test, and he's capable of putting together stretches that are just phenomenal, and I believe that he is exactly what this Houston team needs. Additionally, I think Josh Green could be an interesting piece, although an injury to Brandon Miller, I believe, negates that happening. Malcolm Brogdon at $22.5 million is also certainly an interesting player. And then Simons. The deal that I'm looking at here for Simons would be Simons plus Robert Williams III and Matisse Thybulle for Fred VanVleet and Jock Landale. I think this is a good trade that benefits both teams, especially if there is a plethora of picks attached for the Trailblazers. Our third team is the Oklahoma City Thunder. They are also a non-apron team. They are $16.8 million under, and they have a lot of notable assets. As we know, the Thunder are sitting on a plethora of draft picks spanning all the way to 2031. Just a couple they have Miami's first-round pick, which is protected in 2025 and is unprotected next year. So it's lottery protected this season. If the Heat make the playoffs, the Thunder will get their pick. If they do not make the playoffs, the Thunder will get their pick next year unprotected, which, with Butler gone, who knows what direction the Heat will be in. They also have Philadelphia's first-round pick protected 1 through 6, but I'm going under the assumption that Philadelphia will not be among the 6 worst teams in the league, and they won't end up top 6 in the lottery. Who knows, maybe they will. If that's the case, the pick will just convey to Oklahoma City next year. They also have Denver's first-round pick in 2027 and Dallas's first-round pick in 2028, as well as all of their own first-round picks. The reason I included these picks from other teams is I feel like teams and GMs may look at the Thunder and think, wow, this is a phenomenal future. Let's target some of the other picks they have in their arsenal because they may be more valuable than the Thunder's own draft selections. I think this team, all they need is really some wing help, and I don't even think they need that. I think if they rolled with it, I think it'd be completely fine. They are obviously off to a phenomenal start. They're playing at a 68-win pace, which would be the most in the NBA, I believe, since the 2016 Warriors. And maybe just some fringe additions rounding out this team around the edges, although If it's at the sake of chemistry, I say don't do it. In terms of potential targets, I think all signs point to if this team does make a deal, that deal is Cam Johnson, although I have an asterisk here because Jake Fisher earlier reported that Oklahoma City has not had meaningful dialogues, or there is not documented proof of having dialogues with the Brooklyn Nets. So that makes me doubt that a trade would happen between these two franchises, and I think ultimately what Oklahoma City will do is lean towards keeping this team and riding it out and making hopefully an NBA Finals run. Now our last team, our last buyer is the Sacramento Kings. They're also the fourth non-apron team on this list. We know they were entangled in some mid-season drama, but since they have been dominant, they're on a great stretch right now. They have broken 500 and are now in the playoff push. It looked like they were completely out of it when they were 13-20. In terms of notable assets, their 2027 to 31 first-round picks are tradable. I do not believe they can trade their first-round pick. They do not have their first-round pick this year, which means I do not think that the 2026 first-round pick is eligible to be traded. They also have a couple second-round picks, and just to note, their 2031 first-round pick is the least favorable between them and San Antonio. This team could use wings, and it seems like that's kind of what they're targeting. They also, I feel like they could use some long-term durability. And by that, what I mean is keeping the infrastructure solid for going forward. I think the Kings, as we know, they had a tough 2000s, late 2000s, tough 2010s, and now that they've finally broken through, I think they want to stay on the top of the mountain for as long as possible. I think being a playoff team for them is something that, if you're a fan of the Sacramento Kings, is something that you are striving for, and potentially a move like this could swing them into maybe a dangerous team in the first round. Now, we haven't seen them make it out of the first round in a long time, but maybe there's a deal on the table where they acquire that extra piece, and not only are they streaking now, but it pushes them over the edge to make a playoff push. Some potential targets, I have Cam Johnson again, and then two wings from the Portland Trailblazers, Jeremy Grant and Denny Avdia. I think Avdia is infinitely more interesting. I'm not quite sure with Jeremy Grant what you're getting, because not only is he on the older side, but I feel like his role is kind of synonymous with that of DeMar DeRozan, whereas Avdia is kind of a Swiss Army knife. He plays defense and he's good on offense as well. Some other potential buyers, the Los Angeles Lakers. We know that teams with LeBron James on them are always looking to get better, and there's no doubt about it that Los Angeles is definitely inquiring on some other players. I'm not quite sure if that's maybe a point guard, a cheap point guard, or maybe a center. There's been talks about Vucevic for them, talks of Walker Kessler from the Utah Jazz. Whatever it is, I'm sure the Lakers will make another move to build around LeBron in his final seasons, or maybe not. I don't know. We'll see how long he lasts in the NBA. It's already been 20 years. Maybe he has another 20 in him. The Grizzlies, I don't expect the Grizzlies to make any significant moves as well, but maybe, again, just adding some fringe guys. San Antonio is an interesting team because they might swing and add a player to pair with Victor Wembanyama, maybe take a guy from the Pelicans like a CJ McCollum or Brandon Ingram, get a real co-star next to Victor Wembanyama, and maybe make that playoff push that the Kings and others are hoping to make. Phoenix Suns, we already saw them acquire Nick Richards, and today he debuted and had 18 points and 11 rebounds, just a stellar debut for the new Suns player. I think they may make another fringe move to get the team better as they also gear up to make a playoff push. And my final team for other potential buyers is the Indiana Pacers. I think the Pacers are a dark horse team to make a sneaky big move, and I'm not quite sure what that move is. It might be acquiring Cam Johnson, it might be acquiring someone else, but I think the Pacers are ready to win more big games. We saw them make it to the Eastern Conference Finals next year, and I'd be surprised if they were quiet at the trade deadline. Thank you for watching. Please be sure, as I said, to like and subscribe. It really helps. Look for part 3, maybe a day after, 2 days after. I will be a little busy over the next couple days, and I'm scheduling this to come out on Sunday. So thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next episode.